friends, I'm Isabel, and today I wanted to challenge myself a little bit to paint with only blue for the whole piece. So I usually end up using a lot of blue in my pieces. Lately, I think a lot of my paintings have appeared pretty blue, but typically I'll pick one or two blue hues and then mix in reds and yellows and greens to shift those specific pigments. So I wanted to see what would happen if I challenged myself to only use the blue paints that I have and not mix in other colors, because I do find that sometimes I aim to paint something that's just blue and it ends up being a bit too purple or a bit too green. So I thought I would give it a try and see what happened. This piece ended up being pretty warm as far as blues go. You know, it's a pretty warm blue in the end, and I think that, that works, because if I had tried to incorporate an equal amounts of cool and warm blues, I don't think it would have worked very well. I tend to gravitate more towards warm blues. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's because I live near the Pacific Ocean, which is pretty warm of a blue, which is kind of counterintuitive because tropical oceans are typically cooler. Okay, I guess the Pacific Ocean can be more tropical, but in the area that I live, it's definitely not tropical, so it is very much a warm blue. And I don't know. As you can see, when I'm starting out this piece, it appears like I'm going for a pretty cool blue, but I ended up layering a lot of cobalt blue, and ultramarine I think was the other one that I used a lot, and I'm not unhappy with it at all, but I do like that you can see all the different hues of blue. I thought about doing just like a monochromatic piece and using just one paint. I've done that in the past, and while I was considering that, I wanted to use all the hues because I feel like that adds a lot more depth to the painting. So even though at first look it might appear fairly monochromatic, if you look closely you can actually see all of the shifts in tone, or not tone. Well, there are shifts in tone, obviously, but the shifts in hue, and I think that works really well. One thing that was a bit challenging was not being able to control the saturation of the blue too much, because the way that you dole down a color is by mixing the complementary color with it, but if you're only using blue, you don't have any orange to desaturate it with. So I just kind of had to work with that and work with the paper as it desaturated the paint naturally. The paper that I'm using is the Blick hot press paper. I've used this quite a few times, and it does tend to really lighten the colors and also desaturate them. I really only paint with my White Nights watercolors on this paper, so maybe it's the paint, maybe it's the paper, I don't know. But either way, this combination tends to end up lightening the paint a lot. So you'll see a couple times I decided to just stop and let all the paint dry, and I cut out the part where it's drying, and there's a pretty obvious shift in the amount of contrast and saturation. It's annoying when you're painting a bigger piece and you think you have an area that's like almost perfect but not, it's like it's almost perfect when it's wet, but then when it dries it's not anymore. So it is a bit of a learning curve to try to account for that while you're painting. But I think it worked out with this painting because, like I said, I couldn't really desaturate anything, so the painting itself ended up being fairly saturated, and I actually like the depth that gives this piece. I do think I overworked it a little bit in the end, especially on the right eye, or the eye that is on our right as the viewer. I guess it's the person's left eye. I feel like that eye got a little overworked, especially because the proportions were a tad bit off when I started the painting. You'll have seen me struggling a bit with the sketch in the beginning, and I wanted to leave that in there because a lot of times I just start a video with just the painting process and I just wanted to include the sketch for this one because it was definitely a struggle. I'm not sure why the proportions were so difficult to get right, but they were. And in the end, I was like, I don't really feel like making this absolutely perfect, and that's never really my goal, to make the painting look exactly like the model. I don't really paint a lot of people that are supposed to be recognizable because I prefer to use the face as a vessel for showing emotion. I just take the bone structure of the models and I project my own emotions onto it. So there you go. But I think I definitely messed up that one eye a lot, and as you can kind of tell, I had my iPad up in the background and I kind of stopped looking at the reference. So yeah, I wish I had just kept that one more faded into the background, but that's okay. I still really like the final result. Like I said, I really just like the depth and the contrast that I was able to get. I think a lot of times when I paint with a lot of colors, I can lose the contrast that really makes a piece. If you want a piece to read as a face, the contrast is so much more important than color, and I think that this exercise really just proves that, because even though only the Blue Man Group has blue faces, you can still read this as a face. And sometimes when I try to paint with more realistic skin tones, I get lost in making the colors correct and I don't get the contrast right, and that's really the most important thing in a painting. So I definitely recommend this exercise to anyone who just anyone. Anyone who wants to improve their paintings should definitely try out a one color exercise, even just like one paint exercise. Yeah, I really like this piece, so I hope you like it too. Let me know what your thoughts are. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I did really enjoy taking advantage of the watercolor effects. As you can see, I started out the painting with the piece on a tilted easel board thing, and that let the paint run down the paper and create just kind of a mess. I like starting my paintings off with a mess and then defining it from there, because it keeps me from getting super caught up in the details and everything. So even though this painting had an extra long messy phase, I think it worked out really well. And I think my favorite part is probably the drips on the right side, because they balance out the fact that the face was not quite centered when I drew it. And I also love how the hair blends into the background and into the face, but is still a defined thing. Just that like wet on wet technique there, I felt like that worked out really well. And I also like the little bits of greener blue that shine through, especially in the highlights, because as you saw, I put those colors down first, and then the shadows ended up being more of a warm blue. So I really like that tonal shift, or that chromatic shift as the tones shift, I guess is the right way to say that. I don't know. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I really enjoyed painting it. So if you liked this video, I would love to have you stick around, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Let me know what you think about this down in the comments section, and I will see you next week. Alright, have a wonderful afternoon, morning, or evening, wherever you are, and I will see you next week. Bye bye!